Welcome to the Serious TV Drama Podcast. I'm Scott, and joining me tonight, or today, the arrivederci to my au revoir, the addio to my adieu. It's not me, it's you. It's Jamie. Hey, Jamie, how you doing?
Hey, 'tis I, the resident tall person. I'm here to convince you I'm not entirely stupid.
You know, I thought about incorporating the tall thing because of how ridiculously tall you are. But then I decided, why emphasize the fact that I am not tall? I'm not short, but I am not tall. Average. Anyway, we are back to pay our respects and wipe away a few tears as we say farewell to evil. But, evil never really goes away, so maybe it's just really a see you later, evil. In any case, this is considered to be the series finale, which was not so subtly titled Fear of the End. And of course, a lot of the conversation, I would say most of the conversation in this episode, is going to be about, well, this episode. But honestly, we're talking about the overall series and the unique and strange ride we've gotten for the last 4 seasons. And I was thinking about that 4 seasons is a really interesting number. A number of excellent series over the years have had really fantastic 4th seasons. And then they kept going from there. You name it. The Wire, Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, Mad Men, all had great 4th seasons. Then you have shows that peaked with their 4th seasons, but were never quite as good, or maybe they got considerably worse afterwards. Like Dexter or Game of Thrones. Hey, I'm still mad the criminally overlooked and, if not out and out forgotten about series that's on Netflix, which probably 2 people saw, and they probably both listened to this podcast about it. Travelers, still available on Netflix, I think.
Great show.
It only got 3 seasons, and it really deserved a 4th. But before I derail my own tangential point here, I can think of a handful of series that logged in just 4 seasons, and that was it. And the main ones that came to mind were Mr. Robot, Halt and Catch Fire, and Succession. I could include Sherlock, but I don't want to because that's the kind of show you're talking about 13 or 14 episodes total, something like that. I don't really view that in quite the same way. It felt like more of a collection of little mini movies, kind of like the old Columbo seasons from the 70s.
Right.
But the thing about those 3 shows, the first 3, Robot, Succession, Halt, in each one of those 3 cases, it felt just right for each. It ended when it should have. Yeah, maybe they could have squeezed another season out of Succession, but I think everyone who was a fan of the show was ultimately very satisfied with how they resolved that series. And the same went for Mr. Robot, and the same went for, the less seen but just as worthy of recognition, Halt and Catch Fire. Oh, by the way, if you're one of the many out there who have never seen Halt and Catch Fire, I would say if you like shows like Mad Men, Breaking Bad, and The Americans, you should probably like Halt and Catch Fire, because it deserves to be placed on that status level, that pantheon of TV goodness. And sure, you may get a series that ends after 4 seasons, and after watching the final season, you kind of wish they had just saved the time and money and ended it with 3. But a comment like that might be something that's going to come up on a future podcast, the very next one. But what we're dealing with here with evil, it's the ultimate rarity, is that we're not just sad it's over. Like we were sad when Better Call Saul ended. We were sad it was over because we loved the ride we got with those characters and, wanted to maximize as much as we could. Same with The Americans, same with any number of shows over the years. I speaking for myself and, maybe the tall girl over there, there's a little part of me, maybe not such a little part of me, a big part of me. I'm kind of angry. This shouldn't have ended. It deserved to have a 5th season. It deserved a 5th and a 6th season. In fact, I believe the Kings, the people behind the show, were hoping to do 2 more seasons of this show.
Yeah.
So
they were really, really banking on at least 1 more, possibly 2, to be able to. They said inevitably the ending would have came to be about the same ending, but how they got there would have been a lot different.
I haven't read much of what they said afterwards. I read a little bit, but I didn't really want to delve too much into that. Plus, I figured you would, so I'll leave that for you. I mean, it was kind of surprising. We got the little behind the scenes thing at the very end of the episode where we
Mm-hmm.
got to see like even though it contradicts something I noticed in the episode, but we'll get there early on as we're going through the scene by scene breakdown, which is my way of avoiding the word recap. Um, but yeah, I mean, I suspect 90 something percent of what we're going to be talking about on this podcast will be pretty positive, but that's the one lingering negative that has hung over the series, kind of like a demonic shroud, is that it shouldn't be ending. So F you or fuck you, Paramount Plus. And unless they do a shocking about face and do what they ought to do, you know what? Fuck you to Netflix too, for not leaping up and shaking the Kings to do another season directly for them, or better yet, two. So, with all that said, let's get to the episode. Now, I thought I liked how they kind of opened this episode where we're seeing how the trio, the assessors, I love when a guy with a lisp has to say a word like assessors over and over. We kind of see how they're going to be moving on, and I did like I like the it's a somewhat commonly used device of having essentially a stranger talking to the camera, and it's usually someone in some form of it could be like a therapy session, which is what this actually is. But I've seen that before over the years. You know, you can go back to Woody Allen stuff, to other TV shows, and it was one of those things where it took me like 20 seconds to go, oh, this must be Kristen's practice. It must be her practice. And then because we don't hear her during the first woman speaking, but we do during the second. And then the camera does reverse and we see that it's her. Because I don't think we had seen that she had, painted the walls inside her little, shack yet before this episode.
Yeah, made her office, office looking.
Right. Although it is interesting that later on in the episode, she kind of somewhat echoes something that first woman says during that therapy session about not being seen, about being invisible. And when Kristen is talking later about dealing with priests, how they don't look her in the eye, that she's not there. It's like she's invisible. I'm like, oh, that's interesting that phrase comes up twice in the episode. Not that interesting, but a little interesting. I really adored. So that was kind of a normal thing, and then we get Ben being led to like his his posh little cubicle area, and we see Ben with his suit and tie. I was like, oh, look how spiffy Ben is, and he doesn't have a hat on, and no tinfoil either. I like the nodding acknowledgement to first the guy next to him, and then he realized to do it like to the guy to the left of that guy or whatever. And when he opens the drawer, I think it's someone had etched into the drawer, run.
Scratched it in there. So not a Sharpie. Someone took the time to scratch it in, like claw marks. I liked the imagery of not just the cubicles, because we've all seen that. We've seen that image so much. But the idea that these cubicles were all connected and you can just see down the aisle, it kind of reminds me of those like fun house mirrors, where you see a reflection within a reflection within a reflection within a reflection, and there's seemingly no end. I don't know what Ben's signing up for, but I'm sure it's worth it in the end. That's a big paycheck.
Yeah, but it's literally 10 times what he's making as an assessor. So yeah, the Kings have had a tendency to have fun with bizarre office, dynamics, and either be the architecture or just how people interact. Those folks who are listening, who watched The Good Wife, will recall, for the last number of seasons when they kept showing, organizations, might have been the NSA or whatever, basically listening in on all their phone calls, but they were basically just a bunch of geeks, peeking over each other's cubicles and stuff. And some guys that you'd recognize from other shows that later on, I think one of them was a guy who ended up being in The Office for a while. And I think he was on that Silicon Valley show as well, if I'm not mistaken, but I forget the actor's name. But what I'm saying is that they've done that kind of thing. They've played with that before. So I was kind of like, oh, well, they're mining that again. That works for me. And then, of course, third and last, we have David as he's preparing to, leave his room He's got all packed up, and we've got the old fork-tongued Kristen demon begging him to 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 take her with him. And what I really loved about it was how her voice gets increasingly screechy, and it's it's almost like she's not human. And it gets to the point where the way she's screaming at him is almost not human. It's more inhuman than anything else. It's just out and out extended, inhuman, and weird as he's trying to almost beat her off him as he's trying to get out of the room. And she's still in the the Catholic school
Yes.
outfit, of course.
I think it's really great too because it said something about David without having to say it, and that it was abundantly clear that he was letting go of that attachment.
Mm-hmm.
Because she was there in a pest, and he had the mosquito net, like we like to talk about that, but it's the idea that he kind of allowed her / it to exist along with him.
Right.
It was some forbidden hope or desire, and to see him walking away from it, well, it's begging to come along, and he's like, nope.
Well, the way I looked at it, you're right. Now, again, I don't know if if he had looked into it, if there had been a way he could have absolutely and completely removed that from his life altogether. One would think he could have. So I look at it in a similar fashion. Okay, I'll use my own life right now. Like I had fallen back into smoking last year, unfortunately, and for the dumbest of reasons. But I recently quit. And actually, as we're recording this podcast, I believe today is day 12. So 12 days, right?
All right.
Now, the funny thing is, I quit like 1 or 2 cigarettes into a new pack of cigarettes. Those cigarettes are still in my drawer.
You need to get out that mosquito net.
Now, sure, I've done the thing where I've thrown things away, and I've done the thing where I haven't. Like, it never really mattered to me because if I fall back, it's not because there's one in my drawer, because really it's not like I'm not that far away from any place that sells them, But it's almost what he's doing is like, you kind of, for whatever reason, you decide almost as a test, you keep that temptation around. It's just a reminder, because I have to open that drawer all the time for things. That's where my sunglasses are kept, because I can't leave them on top of my night table because cats. That's where my chargers are, because I can't leave them plugged into the wall anymore because of cats. So so every time I open, I see that little light blue pack of American Spirit. I'm like, nope, not coming anywhere near you, because all I have to do is cough a little bit to remember why I got rid of you in the first place. So I kind of look at, he's keeping that little reminder, that temptation there. It's almost he has been doing that just to prove to himself that he's bigger than that. He's better than that. But now that he's going to be moving, he's literally moving on. At this point in the episode, he believes he's going to, he already knows he's going to Rome at this point.
To Rome, right. Yep.
And that's where you're going to be leaving things like this behind. Even though I do like the temptation, when the little temptation demon, when she even makes the reference to all the other priests and stuff. And I was like, could have phrased it a little bit worse, but yeah. So then we go back to Kristen, and you knew Leland was going to show up. I knew it. It was too good. What's the name he adopts here? Truman. I forget the first name. Edwin Truman or Ernest Truman, doesn't matter. Truman, interesting name choice. I love Michael Emerson's performance here, and it's like, no. I just want you to come meet the 60 tomorrow. I'll leave you and your daughters alone after that. And she, while she's calling in the order of protection and giving all, the serial number for it and the whole thing. She zaps him. Now, I got to say this though. They showed a second of this in that behind the scenes thing. And in the behind the scenes thing, you can see, Michael Emerson falling back, and he's falling back on a mat. That's nice. I watched this a few. I noticed it the very first time, and I was like, just to make sure it wasn't crazy, I went back and I watched it a couple more times. When she initially zaps him and he falls straight back, that's not Michael Emerson falling. It doesn't. You can see it. It looks. It might as well be like a 1960s TV show, like Star Trek or Batman, where it's clearly not. It's clearly not William Shatner. Being fighting at this point. It's. I mean, even the way the hair looks in the guy's face is like, no, that's not. Did they do that on purpose just to be silly? I don't know if anyone noticed it, but that is not Michael Emerson falling back there. But all I kept thinking during the entire scene was like, oh man, Emerson is so damn delightfully funny. And that was
Yes.
that was the first moment in the episode that was my first moment of going, oh, I'm going to miss this damn show. Just because of him, I'm going to miss this damn show.
God, I love when he's like, let's shake. Like, it's just, I don't know. He's such a great actor in everything he's in, but something with Leland just really allows him. I guess we've talked about this a bit, that he gets to cut loose and, like, get a little bit, just a little bit over the top with a lot of things, and it's just so much fun to watch. And as much shit as I give the character of Kristen over the years, this version of Kristen's my favorite.
Right.
When she's on the phone and she's making the call and she's not afraid, when she takes charge, it's just such an interesting aspect to this person who always kind of seems like she's a mess. But in these moments, it's like her shit is so together. She can handle an emergency better than anyone.
Right. So I'm probably gonna jump around a little bit just to merge a couple things together here. So I'm probably gonna skip over the boys showing up to help out with Leland here, because I kind of want to bounce right to the girls. Because it's funny, because every time we have an episode and we can think, okay, there's no more cases now, it's only going to be about so and so. And even though there technically wasn't a case in this episode, we still got a storyline which was kind of sort of like a case. And we get the girls, and for whatever reason, they decided to, dig through their mom's shoes, which I guess they don't need to, put for auction or sell to their friends anymore. They want to dig out these VR goggles, virtual reality stuff, which is a callback that goes all the way back to season 1, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's like the 4th or 5th episode of season 1 that incorporated those goggles, if I'm not mistaken. But this time, when they want to use them, and they want to tap into this game called Mother Midnight. And so they go into the closet with the goggles. 2 of them, I guess, do it, right? It's we know who they are. It doesn't matter. The two oldest sisters go into the closet, do the incantations, and what they end up experiencing or seeing, they see Leland actually killing their mom, using that climbing pick that she herself killed a dude with. I guess that was the end of season 1. So two callbacks for the price of one. And speaking of callbacks, because at some point, while this is happening, it's later that evening, actually. So and the 3 are hanging out together. By the way, there's been a few things more fun the last couple episodes. Is just Kristen, David, and Ben kind of being in somewhat just conversational relaxation mode.
Yes.
I gather that's probably some of the more fun stuff to write, because you can write just for the characters and the actors here. And at this point, they're burning the files that, Giovanni Davita keeps asking, oh, where David? Where?
Ghost truckers, yeah.
And they start, and this, talking about callbacks, they're riffing through all the plots of all these different episodes, cannibal students, ghost truckers, the demonic elevator, which is so cool. They bring up the Christmas song. And all this is happening. And at some point, that kind of haunted train is going by overhead, with the electricity that comes off like lightning bolts while it goes by. I was like, look at this. They're packing all this previous evil episode stuff all in this one little moment here. But they hear the scream, they go running, and they're checking out the goggles. And that's when Ben notices that there's a countdown going on the goggles. And I think it's kind of deliberate that, especially when they do the close up of it, that we get that pulsing rhythmic beat, which sounds an awfully lot like the old 24 TV show. I mean,
Yep.
I think that had to be deliberate.
Yep. It really does.
And I think it's at that point we get the opening credits. So unfortunately, we didn't get no pop up book happening, with this one. I was kind of hoping they would return to that. And the little disclaimer, and this is like 18-ish minutes into the episode, I believe. And we do get the, for old time's sake, don't skip this intro. And they kept it simple. And I don't believe there was any subliminal stuff in this.
Nope. Not this time.
So where we come out of that, we get to an aspect of the episode which is probably among my favorite things in the episode, which is hard to say because there's so much I love in this episode. But I think every scene dealing with, Leland and what do we call him? Mr. Stick, if we want to call him that, or John Carroll Lynch's character.
Yep.
And the scenes that come later they're a treasure. But here they're having what appears to be auditions.
The casting call.
The casting call for a screaming woman at a black mass, whatever. You had to love. I know you did when after they speak to one, and no, she says it later on in the episode. She hasn't taken this scene. I already mentioned. Later on, that same woman, I guess she gets the gig when she makes a reference to that she had a small part in Midnight Mass.
Yes. They've made a couple different mentions to his work over the last 4 years.
Yep. Which is understandable. Especially
I really love it. There's, of course, you could say, oh, we're going to make mentions of all these classic, horror movies or writers, and it makes sense that they would do that. But there's just something really great about just a little head nod towards somebody who's currently doing it.
Yeah, contemporary. Yeah, it's
right.
It's just like when you listen to an athlete refer to a current athlete and as far as someone that they follow and admire as opposed to someone from their past or whatever. But what I'm liking about this scene, and as we move forward through the episode with all the scenes with Leland and Stick, I noticed a few things. Noticing that Leland doesn't no longer comes off as if he's intimidated by this guy anymore. I noticed that in a few different scenes, as the demonic comb-over guy. I mean, he doesn't seem to be any more intimidated by him than Sister Andrea, who again shows up, and that's when he takes on the demon form, and he steps out, still dragging those rotting bodies behind him. And okay, did anyone not love him going, I have a free hook for you. And she's like, ooh, terrified. And I think
she grabs
I think she kind of boops him on the nose.
He did.
A little bit of a boop on the nose. And I was just, oh man, I want another season just to have more Sister Andrea. And I never, considering how little I liked her on Only Murders in the Building, God, I love Andrea Martin on this show. Oh, it's the best thing she's done in like 40-something years, man. But adored all that. And what I was saying before about one of the really enjoyable things about this season specifically is the downtime we're spending with, David, Kristen, and Ben. And we get it again. They've had a bit to drink, and they're just talking about how they have influenced each other around the fire. And I love that the conversation kind of veers from being kind of fun to kind of deep. And when each of them speaks about how the other one has impacted them, it's a real, I don't want to go quite as far as to say that it's moving, but I thought it was very nice. It's very nice.
Yeah. I liked the idea of being, humbled, by other people's knowledge. People that you wouldn't normally compare your intelligence next to.
Mm-hmm.
And I also really liked that when David talked about having friends, it wasn't, is kind of the first time you see it where it wasn't like a second thought to include Ben. You
Hmm.
know, he started that embrace by grabbing Ben's shoulder and then pulled them both in. And I just thought that was really sweet because we always get a, well, what about me from Ben? And he didn't have
Yeah,
to do that here.
I'm glad because I don't mind that happening once or twice because there
Hmm.
has been a little thing between David and Kristen that's been kind of apparent, and even Ben talked about it in an episode. But I wouldn't say that it should be had been the case all four
No.
seasons. It's about the three of them, not about the two of them plus one other guy, kind of a thing.
Yep.
Um, so I did appreciate that there was a significant um, amount of that in between all of them, and that Ben's actually addressed first for his the respect for his knowledge, whereas the impact that David's had on Kristen is more about the feeling of reverence, and that has
Yes.
changed how she views things and talks about things, and the way David speaks about just like you said, that he never really had many friends, um, which kind of makes sense because we've really rarely seen any indication that he's had many friends over the last four seasons. We got a reference to an ex in that
That's
episode
pretty
this
much
season,
it.
but not much else. I'm not saying that's what leads you to join the priesthood, but probably doesn't hurt. Um, but anyway, so after all the stuff that goes on with the goggles and the girls and figuring out what's going on, they realize they're going to give it a shot themselves. Well, Kristen is. And next thing you know, David's going to, I love what are you doing? Something stupid. And I was like, I just love the line. I was like, oh, we should cue the song. So they all don the VR goggles. They go into the closet. David's a little reluctant to bother with the incantations, whatever. He finally goes, all right, fine. And they each have a pretty bad experience.
Well, and even before, like it was one of the highlights of the three favorite parts of this episode. This one was definitely in the three.
Mm-hmm.
Is when the hand comes over and touches Ben and turns him, and he goes, "Holy fuck!"
Mm-hmm.
It was so it was so good because here's a guy who's experienced a lot of crazy shit over the last few weeks, just on his own.
Mm-hmm.
Few years, honestly, but especially over with the gin and whatnot. And it's still like something just managed to just creep the ever loving hell out of him.
Right. Right, because he's dealing with something where it's virtual reality, but
Mm-hmm.
it's the sensory is supposed to be your ears and eyes. It's not supposed to be tactile. And when he actually feels
Yes.
something grab, and we see it,
Wasn't expecting that.
we see it's like a demon's hand. It looks, the arm actually looks similar to could have been George. Is George the name of the demon that's always bothering Kristen?
Yes.
Okay, Mike, hold
Well,
on.
that, yep.
Let me make
Yep.
sure I didn't screw that up. Yeah, and he essentially gets dragged off to have his experience, which is, I know one should make the case that David has the worst one, and I get, and clearly I get why. I think Ben has the most, for me, it was the most emotionally affecting of the three, because Kristen's, we'll get to in a second. Kristen's, I felt was kind of obvious. But Ben, when he's brought to a room where basically his sister is dying,
Mm-hmm.
and they're questioning the idea of an afterlife, and the fact that his, I don't know, whether we want to say he's agnostic or a straight up atheist because of his basis of thinking about everything scientifically.
He did tell that the assistant to the scientist on the last episode that he was an atheist.
Right, which goes pretty much hand in hand with the type of person and how he speaks about things. But it's the knowledge of, it's almost, you don't want, even if you're an atheist, there's always that part of you like, oh, but it'd be kind of nice if I'm wrong, because otherwise it really is nothing. And having that confirmation and experiencing it through the loss of his sister in that moment
Mm-hmm.
was really, it was surprising in how powerful it was, even though and the fact that he's going into this knowing this can't be, this is not real. Although he's astonished by how well it's done. How is the AI generating this to such a powerful extent, as he keeps theorizing throughout part of the episode until they actually figure stuff out later on. But I thought that was the most really emotionally effective of the three. Kristen.
Well,
Oh,
it stands to reason too, because that scene was the last of the series shot. It was the very last scene they shot.
oh, did not know that.
So I think there was probably some definite, grief and goodbye and closure happening all in that scene, just naturally.
Interesting. Then we go to Kristen's experience, and then we do get a Boggs appearance. By the way, apparently Boggs makes it to the end of the series. Didn't die. Leland was wrong.
I'm a little surprised that Boggs made it.
No, and I'm kind of glad he got to make it to this very kind of this fantasy Boggs version, where he's just being kind of I don't want to say he's being kind of a scumbag to Kristen, because I'm listening to him. It's like, he's kind of right about everything he's saying here about her. Which there is even parts in the episode itself where she realizes, there's a lot of instances where she hasn't been, the greatest of mothers, whatever.
Oh, we've called her out on it a few times.
But, I'm sure she's still a better parent than I would ever be. But we get this situation where, and then you have this, it's almost like this tribunal of extras where it's just there to judge Kristen. And if and if any of them are anyone of any note, I didn't notice it. They just looked like a bunch of random people.
Yeah, if there was a callback, I didn't catch it either.
But they're basically taking away her children. So I was like, okay, and which leaves her screaming and whatnot. I was like, yeah, okay, but it probably makes sense. David gets to have his experience, and he gets to see Sister Andrea. Yay. And that a demon comes bursting through that wall downstairs. And it's now that I believe it's the stick demon, right?
Yes.
But attacks David and basically rips out his throat, and leaving Leland to chuckle over him and how he's devoted his life to essentially, I guess, like a fairy tale filled with false hope and whatever. And as David is, a huge puddle of blood is streaming out of him. And I believe there's all these weird little bugs that are starting to approach him because, just bleeding out isn't bad enough.
No, we need to add bugs.
You need
Why
creepy
not?
crawlies. And of course I got happy because it gave us a Leland moment. And I'm going to use this spot now. I just thought of it, so let's just do it. That way we can have a conversation here. And they talk about it in that behind the scenes thing at the end. Now, again, I haven't read any articles that came out after. If you have, that's fine. And if you want to incorporate that, whatever, I'm going by my own views, and I'm assuming you would as well. What's interesting is it's his, experience, which involves Leland. And it's in that moment, I was thinking about it at the time going, yeah, you know what? They've been playing up as much as it's been this Leland Kristen thing because of all the conflict with her and all the issues with, with getting her with the eggs and with the impregnation and him screwing with her, whatever, and the fact, I think at one time, weren't they both kind of dueling, kind of like psychiatrists who would take the stand for clients and stuff way back in the very beginning and stuff. But I feel like you had that at the beginning of the show, and that's always been there. But as far as who's really in opposition to each other,
right?
It's more David versus Leland because they do represent the opposite,
the good and evil,
right? And I think I'm not going to say they got away from that during the course of the show, but I think they didn't play it up as much until we got to these later episodes, especially when they were experiencing the remote viewing within each other, and just their conversations, even in the last episode, really kind of worked towards that. And it is one of those things where I wonder if the show had a more organically extended lifespan for an additional season or 2 seasons, if they just would have, the natural lean into David versus Leland would have played itself out at a different pace and it would have been more clear as we went along, as opposed, I'm not going to say it was an abrupt shift, but it was a little bit, because it felt like the Leland stuff was really between him and Kristen, and to a certain extent, and with Cheryl thrown into the mix as well as being part of it. And
Yeah.
David's connection to Leland seemed to not have been as strong over the last couple seasons, outside of like him killing like the Monsignor that time when everyone thought he was going to kill the Grace, I think is what her name was. Um, I just thought it was interesting when I watched this. It's like, okay, it's really David versus Leland more than anything else.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. And then you add to the idea, and we'll probably come back to this.
yeah,
I'll want to come back to this later
yeah,
when we get further into the episode. But the idea that they are part of each other, since they saw in that transfer that they had, that they each kind of carry a part of the other person inside of them as
right.
well. But with Kristen, it's like Leland's goal with Kristen wasn't ever a battle of good versus evil. It's like she was always kind of a plaything for him.
Hmm.
It's like he really was just he wanted to make her evil.
Well, there's something that's said throughout a few times in this episode, and I kind of thought we would talk about it later, but it is mentioned earlier in the episode when during the audition scene when Stick has the line to Leland about he doesn't understand why he's
Yeah.
been protecting
Yes.
Kristen, and I wrote protecting Kristen. I wrote and they really go into that more in post Zoom conversation later on as well. I mean, we could jump ahead and just deal with it now. I suppose it doesn't really matter. Um, it's interesting because I think, well, obviously Leon's a screwed up guy. That goes without saying, and it's up. And I don't think he has feelings of any kind of love for Kristen.
No.
There's some lust going on, certainly, but there is a certain, however, what's only a few steps away from love can be obsession. And he definitely has an obsession with her. And the fact that the tendrils of his little seeping evil has kind of drawn themselves throughout her life with the dealing with Cheryl, with Andy, with what he did with her daughters, with all the interactions they had in courtrooms, in offices, next door, etc. It's almost like, it's funny how I talked about David and the temptation demon being something he keeps around as a reminder. To a certain, in a weird way with Leland, I think Leland's kind of addicted to Kristen and having
Oh,
her being a
yeah.
presence in his life.
It's like a
Whereas,
stalking, right?
whereas he's just like, I'm so used to this. I can't, I don't want to get rid of my little stalking horse here. I need to keep this around. Whereas he wouldn't would have no issue like slitting the throats of any number of other characters, including killing, even Cheryl herself, a few weeks ago.
Yeah, and
Excuse me.
he's never given anything or that there's any sort of desire to have her desire him. It's always more of a I want her to desire doing the wrong thing. It's like that's where he gets his rocks off with her. Like he is obsessed and he's going to have to keep her around, but he's never trying to convince her to want him.
Right. And also he's going to view, I mean, while both David and Kristen are, to a certain extent playthings for him, right? And he's in opposition to them. He also knows that Kristen is already tainted. He knows that.
That it's there.
No, so the purity is not there anymore with Kristen. She's killed. She's done things. And I believe I've always taken it on, the assumption he's pretty goddamn well aware of that. I think that's
Yes.
been established already. So with Kristen, it's like, okay, I think he views like, you don't seem to know it yourself, but you're already on my team. I just, we already signed you. You already put
Right.
your name on a dotted line somewhere once you've done something. Guess what? If there is a hell, you might be going there.
Well, and that all that stands to reason because I mean they did pick her egg.
Right. But with David, David, David's more about, crushing the faith for him.
Hmm.
That because whereas she doesn't have that kind of faith, she doesn't, at best she's a lapsed Catholic. David is all about the institution and he's just trying to show David that, especially when David finds out that he was actually in his place essentially
Right.
years ago. And he's like, yeah, and look what they're doing to you. It's what they did to me. It's a different type of temptation for him. He's trying to lure David over and he can do it based on his own experience, which is what he's been doing. It's and th- and that's why I think it becomes more about a David Leland thing than a Kristen Leland thing, because I realize, oh, it's the shared experience and they're in opposition, but it's almost like the two sides of the same coin kind of a situation.
Well, yeah, it's like we were saying, had said before, it's the Jedi setup,
Right, right, right.
of the dark side and the light side. Um, but I do like when he's asked about with the protecting Kristen. But that kind of made me think like is he's never seemed to want to protect Kristen. I think he's always kind of wanted to keep her to himself.
Hmm.
Um, but maybe if he's sensing any protection being there, maybe that's the part of him that's David.
Perhaps that would work.
Because I don't feel like that side, um, like Leland's side, I don't feel like it's that everyone's privy to the information that part of David is inside of Leland.
Right. I don't think they would be, because he's certainly not going to volunteer that. And I
Mm-mm.
don't think I don't have the impression that he's let them know about the remote
No.
viewing between them. At least I don't recall it. He's let them know other things that happened when he was there, in which we hence they be able to pull off their little, not, murder sting operation later on. Um, yeah, so we're going to get more into that later. I don't want to jump into certain things that just don't make sense to talk about now. Don't make more sense to talk about later, especially during what might be one of my favorite scenes in the entire episode. But we're not there yet. They have this experience, the declaration, that was not a game. And then we get this lovely, almost creepy Twilight Zone-ish, the Jordan Peele do this moment scene where they notice outside the house the sheer creepiness of all these people with the VR
Yes.
goggles peering into through the windows and you see like just dozens of them outside. And the one thing I couldn't help but think, because there's the one guy who tries to get into the house and he gets as far as the kitchen and they have him down on the floor, and he's so upset because he's absolutely certain that his daughter is going to die unless he's able to get through this door and where he thinks it leads to the basement, whatever. And I kept thinking, they're not being terribly sympathetic to a guy who is clearly certain his actual daughter is going to die. It seemed really kind of fucked up to me because
Right.
because they should realize, like, okay, they're all experiencing something like you just experienced just minutes ago, and they believe this to be true.
Yep.
But I mean,
Have a little bit of empathy amongst the confusion.
come on, you're the haunted house with a tunnel to hell in the basement. Reddit said
I'll
so.
tell you I'll tell you what, we've said what we've said about the basement.
Mhm.
Obviously her room has been a popular place for creepy happenings, but there's just something about that damn yard. That yard is the scariest part of that entire property for me because every time, with the exception of when the three of them are out there burning stuff, every time we're in that yard, something terrifying is happening.
Right, right, right.
And just the idea of like all these people suddenly knowing their home. I like from this part of this fraction of the storyline on, I was just delighted to see how they started putting these pieces together.
Yes, when you realize that they had laid the foundation for so many things with in a way that we just didn't realize at the time. And I
Oh,
really love that
I love we didn't see this all
because
coming.
at this point, after their encounter with the guy that they throw out of the house and their mutual VR experience, and they start talking about how they saw the house, and when David recalls a certain detail with stars that were hanging from the ceiling, which haven't been up since the hurricane happened, and they were trying to figure out how the AI or whatever was able to access all this information. And then we get another callback. We get the callback to the Demon Tracker app that we played with several episodes ago. And then when we discover that the Demon Tracker app, hey, who's responsible for this? Oh, it's DF, our lovely friends at DF, DF, which I always sound like the fuck. Anyway, I keep thinking that that's the secret joke. That's what it's supposed to stand for, or whatever. Which, of course, I mean, obviously, anyone who's been watching the show, DF, that's the initial of the organization that Leland came from. The off, everything from stealing babies' eggs to bring about the apocalypse. That's what they do. That's what we do here at DF. So now all of a sudden you start realizing how things are starting to come together, and how all these kind of seemingly trivial or silly things are like, no, that's part of an overarching plot. And they're all building to how this leads to this, leads to this. I dug that as well, the way we see that happen throughout this episode. So we go to another fun moment. From here, we're at the church, and we've got Leland and Stick, and it looks like it looks like they got part realtor, part party planner, helping them to arrange this black mass they're going to have there. And for those of us who are actually New Yorkers, we recognize the things she's referring to, like the Limelight, which was a well-known club here in the city, which actually was in a church in the Flatiron district, and now it is no longer a club. I don't know what the hell it is now. It still looks like a church from the outside, but it ain't cool no more. But I really dug what was going on. And this is the part where you start to realize that the entity, that the organization that Giovanni is heading up here, well, their men are already there. They got the little Bluetooth things. They're speaking Italian or
they're
Latin
like
to each other.
Ocean's 11ing this place.
Yeah, they're all clearly there. And it's when you're listening to what Leland and especially Stick are saying about what they're planning, they're being so over the top and out in the open about it. You almost wonder how the entity isn't picking up on this. This is a big sham that they're playing, that they're playing you. Because Sister Andrea certainly realizes it.
Yeah, I mean, especially when they got to the part about where they want to place the cauldrons.
But what's great is she basically eventually bolts out of the church, marches across the street where she sees, the smooth black van, which is clearly, from the Vatican, whatever, then, knocks on the door. I'd make a knocking sound effect, but my post-production removes all the sounds I do, apparently, which really sucks. Anyway, of course, and Giovanni's there, and she just basically says, they're not as obvious as you think. You have this wrong. It's like, thank you, sister. Slam the door in her face.
That whole invisible woman thing.
Yeah. It's the little touches I love in any performance and anything I've watched over the years. The little touch that they use, that she does, where one of the Vatican security guys, walks over to her, big strapping Italian man, whatever. And remember, Sister Andrea is very short. She's 5 foot if she's lucky. And this guy is obviously well over 6 feet, I would think. And the way she looks up at him and then, puts her finger and just takes a second to examine the little pin on his lapel, the little red symbol on it, and just peers at it like she's Larry David from Curb Your Enthusiasm or something, just for a second before she walks away. That little touch was just so fucking cool, because because you could have just had her just walk away, or just give the guy a look and walk away. That little move was something special. I really kind of enjoyed that quite a lot. If I had a larger screen TV and I went up to it, I would try to look at what was on the lapel, what was on the pin, why she was so interested in looking at it. What did it represent? Is it the insignia does the entity have their own insignia? I don't know. But I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, I like that she pinpointed somebody who was so tall and then, tells them later, like, find somebody who's tall.
Right. It's pretty much the following scene. It's when we get the revelation about they figure out, and I think it's David who picks up on it when they've got the image of the regions of the brain and the 60 regions and what they represent and different parts of the brain, and all of a sudden it clicks for David, and they put up the image of we've seen dozens of times on the series at this point, the map of all the sigils for the 60 and
Yeah.
how they transpose them over and they perfectly line up with the 60 regions of the brain. And they're like, what the fuck? Or,
That
or,
was so
or,
satisfying.
or DF, it's like, the fuck? Whatever. And it's at that moment Sister Andrea calls David and he goes, I'm kind of busy. It's like, no, you need to, why would he believe it? Because you're tall. They listen to people who are tall. And he does try to make the call when he realizes what's happening because he's almost a little bit dismissive of it himself until he sees the thing with the map and the sigils, and then the realization is like, wait a minute, why would they meet? And I love the realization because so much of the show has been, you know, about not just about demonic evil and classic possessions and Satanism and demons and whatever, which have obviously played a part in many of the episodes, but it's also about how evil has infected our technology to such a great extent. In a weird way, they kind of go over, if you think about the way the show has gone over the 4 seasons, you can almost line up every once in a while how things kind of have a Black Mirror kind of
Yes.
effect because that most of what Black Mirror is about how technology has led to ruin and dystopian situations or whatever. And that's essentially what we find out the 60 are actually trying to do, you know? But it's like, yeah, at this point in time, why would you get all 60 to fly from all around the world to go in one place to meet if you don't have to? We got these things called Zooms now.
And it's so great that though it's a pattern we've seen throughout all 4 seasons, the little idea of like technology is evil, but it was done in such a way where it's like that never felt like that was the actual plot.
Right.
But here we are, and it's like technology is the evil,
Yeah.
guys. Did you know? Of course it is.
Well, I mean, it's funny how this is a show that is so based on the paranormal and the metaphysical and the supernatural, but the idea of technology being at the forefront of a form of evil, you can go back to, there's always been the belief of AI kind of taking over. It's a fear today. It's expressed constantly, and we've seen it in our movies and books and television for decades upon decades.
Yep.
However far back you want to go, you can go back to 2001 and the HAL 9000. You can go back further than that. The Terminator movies are all about that. Technology has taken over the evil. You can go to that Twilight Zone episode where all technology is just trying to kill the
Yeah.
guy. It's been done for years. But here we when we realize the setup is happening and we get the girl who's doing the audition, that's where she has the line about, I was in Midnight Mass. And by the way, I did look her up. I was wondering, hey, wouldn't it be funny if she actually was in Midnight? She wasn't. I was hoping maybe the actual actress maybe had a bit part in it. It's not. If she was, it certainly wasn't listed. So I'm gonna assume she was. And darn it, the fact that she chooses after she has the interaction with Don Giovanni, right? And she gives him the little note. It's like, the basically telling him, hey, the evil that's in New York, it's you. Haha. The choice made to start singing The Sun Will Come Out Tomorrow. I don't know quite how I felt about that. I kept wondering, well, now, was this something the actress chose to do here? I mean, in terms of the storyline, that this character decides, I'll just do this as like an additional audition for a potential part, or was that part of the thing that she was instructed to do? Because I kept thinking, well, wouldn't Leland pick a different kind of a song, which we'll get to shortly? Would but something as goofy as The Sun Will Come Out Tomorrow, like that kind,
It
That
was
still
a
would be
little,
weirdly
it was
fitting.
weird placed, right?
Yeah, it was
But,
very strange to me.
but I, but there was a little part of me that felt like it was just a personal nod to us because I was so adamant in trying to get you to understand 4 episodes ago that whenever Ben would walk into Kristen's house and the girls would just clamor over him,
Oh,
that it made me think of the girls with Sandy and Annie. And I thought, how appropriate is it in the same month that they actually provide me an Annie reference? So it felt weird to you, but I knew what this was about.
it's about something some tall girl named Jamie said on a podcast that no one, practically no one listens to. So David does show up, and he's, of course, the only person he can save is Giovanni Davide, even though Davide initially thinks he's dead, but then he doesn't. Okay, whatever. And we'll get back to that. Who cares? What comes up now, in some ways, is my favorite scene in the entire episode. In many ways. You know what? In all ways. It's my favorite scene in the episode.
So good.
It's the Zoom meeting. There are so many little things in this moment, this scene, which I think are fantastic. And some are less obvious than others. I'm going to hit one of the less obvious ones first. Because at the beginning of the meeting, which is being essentially led by Stick, I'm so glad that I now know to call him Stick, because I didn't know what the hell to fucking call him for even though I kept being told what his name is. Anyway, he's clearly, he's starting the meeting. He's clearly, the person running the meeting. But there's that moment early on where Leland speaks, and and Leland is kind of almost like morning DJ, over the top kind of go getter. And there's this brief look of disdain by Stick. Now again, it's not the look of, one of my subordinates is going, over his, it wasn't that. It was just like, more like, what are you doing? You used to be cool, man. What's wrong? He doesn't say that, but it kind of felt like that in the moment. And that was the moment like, wow, in this moment, Leland's not cool at all, dude. What's wrong with you?
He's buying into the corporate enthusiasm.
So they're laying out the success of their plan. They're kind of doing the thing where, if we hadn't picked up on everything already, we're getting a little bit of exposition of what this has all been leading up to for, not just weeks, but seasons, quite frankly. The fact that they can basically essentially upload despair to the human brain directly. You can cut out the middleman. You can cut out this. We don't got to run around trying to do stuff. It's, technology is at our disposal to help bring about the apocalypse. But first, really depress the fuck out of people as well. So, and at the same time, how much of a success they were at, pulling the wool over the eyes of the entity and actually killing off at least 18 of them. And apparently this must be a very small and tightly run organization, since killing 18 people is going to be such a severe setback for them. We have 2 moments back to back. And again, this is what makes, for me, Evil such a fascinating and great series. It all happens within a couple minutes of each other here. 2 minutes of each other. We have one of the demons, one of the hairy goat looking like demons here. Norman. Having a problem with Zoom, because there's always that one person. It's usually more than one person, quite frankly. If you're going to have a thing with 60 people, you're going to have probably multiple people do this, who doesn't seem to realize that he's on mute. And I love Leland kind of trying to. It's like, no, it's the button down there. It looks like a lozenge. And you see, and I think you can tell that the demon's got like a huff, whatever, and he's trying. Okay, the humor of that is just it's chef's kiss. It's perfect. It's almost immediately followed by something which kind of made me go, okay. It's not exactly a moment where I was quote unquote right about anything, But when we spoke about the episode, I guess it was the 10th episode, which I do know at this point that would have been the final episode of the season if this had been a normal season, and these four, in some form, they would have been different, but they would have been part of a future season.
Right.
That was the episode that in the storm with Sister Andrea, she encounters the Gray Man. And I
Yep.
said then, I've seen a lot of demons on the show, a lot of bads, whatever. This is the one that I thought was the scariest one of them all. And the simplicity of it and the sheer, the fact that he looks like, us just like a black, a black and white Magritte painting, quite frankly, or something.
Right.
But there's something just so frightening about everything
When
about
you said, "I know who you are."
the voice that was chosen and everything. It was, when the Gray Man said that to Andrea, you mean, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Because that's the only one that Andrea seemed scared of compared to
Yeah.
anyone else she's encountered.
Yep.
Now on the Zoom, what they do here, it's one of those things like most people, again, I guess many of us are probably involved in Zoom or WebEx or whatever it is, where you have your camera on or you'll just have just a little icon, usually with like your name on it or your initials, whatever. And the fact that the Gray Man icon, it's like a simple Gray Man icon with the little hat. Okay, it starts with just a second of humor because they do incorporate the raised hand, which I thought, oh, look, Gray Man's raising his hand. But the deference with which Stick speaks to him right from the beginning, when you realize he's basically calling him sir, that Stick seems intimidated or scared of this guy. And you got that creepy ass voice again, and there's no bones about it with this one because he's asking about, killing the false antichrist, and we're supposed to be sacrificing the baby and the mother. When is this going to happen? And you have the exchange of looks between Stick and Leland, where it's like, you better fucking say something right now. And Leland finally, tonight it'll happen, and they do this weird sound. And when you have the closed captioning on, like I do, it says, Gray Man grumbles. And I was like, is that really a grumble? It's like the sound. It's like the sound of like, a harsh wind blowing through the woods or something. And he just disappears from the screen. I went, okay, now I'm pissed off again that we're not getting another season because I want more with the Gray Man. It's clearly the scariest fucker on the side of evil. I want more with him. We're not going to get more. So that just made me so angry. I wrote, my notes where I just looked. Gray Man grumbles, disappears, yikes. And it's at that point where, I mean, on that note, Stick clearly just decides, let's end the meeting. And that's when he kind of gets his kind of balls back and he basically tells Leland, again, referring to the fact he's always acting like he's been protecting Kristen. But in this time he says, yeah, no more fucking around.
Mm-hmm.
Because best because this ain't just me. This ain't just 60. That one wants you to take care of it. Because something tells me if it's not taken care of, Gray Man blinks and Leland goes bye-bye.
Yep.
So I guess at this point, I think we had the whole scene between David and Davida where David kind of rejects the whole concept of joining the entity, that he never feels quite godly when he's with them and the things he had to do with them. But he does kind of strike a bargain to bring the assessors program back online and back. But it turns out he'd have to bring them to Rome. And then, so we have the scene where he's trying to convince Ben and Kristen that to let's continue doing this, but we'll do it in Rome. And Ben's we already know Ben's gonna be out immediately because I kept thinking, I'm waiting for the money to be mentioned because we know Ben's making $650,000. So I'm already like, there's no way Ben's turning that down. I know it's in a cubicle, but who cares? I know it said run etched into his drawer. It's $650,000. He's got to pay for that crazy loft somehow, man. Because I don't know.
Yeah.
Let me just say, because they didn't seem to reference at any point Ben was doing anything else other than being an assessor. That was the. I don't recall them ever saying he had any side projects or whatever. He's making $65,000. He's paying for that loft.
Mm-mm.
He better have. There better be some family money there, man. Just saying, better be some family money. Cause that loft's definitely a few $1,000s, at least three to $4,000 a month. If I would
It's
guess.
a nice place.
Nice place, big place. So, and at this point, Kristen is kind of just won't accept it, and to her credit, she gives a lot of good reasons that really are more about her and her character and her belief system. Never mind the fact that neither one of these are churchy people to begin with, but they were, and it's one thing to work for the church here, but it was always kind of like you still felt separated from it. You're actually going to actually go to Rome and work for the Vatican, and which means you really are buying into all this. It's something that she's going to reject because she's going to be this. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's at this point she starts bringing up the entire patriarchy of the church.
Yes.
And her invisibility. And this is something, this is a point that it's come up a few times in the last, several episodes. And not that it didn't come up in earlier seasons as well. Of course it did. But I feel the show itself, maybe, especially once they realized, okay, we only have they've given us 4 more episodes to wrap everything up. But I think they also took advantage of that to really have some interesting commentary about views on the church. And, we go back to that earlier episode between Father Ignatius and Sister Andrea and them talking about that. Other conversations we've had that have happened on the show about faith, about the institutions of the church and whatever. And we bring it back here where we know, and Kristen's views are more than valid. They're pretty much spot on, especially the way women are treated by the church, which goes for a lot of organized religions, by the way. They're far from the only
right.
one.
It's not just Catholicism, but it's great in the way that they showed us that idea or that concept, that reality. But they showed it from the viewpoint of a woman who was inside of the church and a viewpoint of the woman who's no longer a part of the church, rather than just one-sided. And even the person inside of the church, the woman inside of the church, who has seemingly more faith than anybody else that she works alongside of, it's still, like we said earlier in this episode, kind of ignored, overlooked. She knew what was going on before anybody else.
Right. And it's brought up in that scene between David and Davita, where it's like, how did you know? It's like, it was Sister Andrea, who, by the way, kind of told you, and you guys kind of ignored her.
And the idea that they would take somebody like that and go lock her away to stay silent.
Yeah, that's it. It's an interesting indictment of the whole way the church is run, and since we know that of all the characters, she's probably been the one to maintain her faith more so than anyone else has.
But I give the Kings a lot of credit in their way to be able to write this so that you could very clearly see the argument. That's a real argument in the real world, about organized religion in general, especially Catholicism, but organized religion and the placeholders of it.
Right.
But they also did it in a way that wasn't just they were holding something responsible for itself, but they weren't degrading it. Because we did have the people that we loved who were the quote unquote good guys who did support the ideas of faith and the sanctity of the church. So it wasn't just, we're just slamming the church to slam it. It was like, let's be honest about it.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting how after 4 seasons of this series and the obvious knocks that the church, Catholic Church specifically, has gotten, should be getting, whatever, and it's not like it hasn't been touched on in comments here and there over the course of the series, but it wasn't, at the same time, it wasn't something they chose to hammer away at. You know,
Right.
we didn't, I mean, we didn't have storylines that had anything to do that really played into like, you know, pedophilia in the church and things of that nature with what happened with so many priests, whatever. But they also didn't ignore it. It was referenced it
Yep.
more than once on the show. So, and and I don't know, I can't recall what was said in the first season compared to the later seasons because obviously there was a higher level of concern about anything they did on network, on CBS,
Yeah.
essentially a CBS procedural show in season one compared to a streaming show where you could pretty much do almost whatever you want, or at least the reins would be a heck of a lot looser. I mean, I'm sure the actress Katja Herbert's is her last name. Is that how it's pronounced? Probably relished the fact that she gets to say fuck so many times on the show. Um, that's the thing with the Kings. Whenever they do a show that ends up being extremely like, okay, whoever our main character is, she's gonna say fuck a lot. You know, Christine Baranski, you know, guess what? You get to say fuck all the time now, which you couldn't say for like 8 seasons of, or whatever many it was of The Good Wife, but you can say it 3 or 4 times an episode on your own show now. Um, right. So you have this whole conversation that they're having, and she kind of is, at this point, she's kind of refusing to do it. She doesn't want to, she just wants to have a normal life, finally. Ha, ha, ha. And, meanwhile, of course, I love it's almost a joke for her to say, "Don't tell the girls," when we know that every time there's a conversation that
Yeah.
happens at a house, they are always up on the landing listening to the entire conversation. That's like the third time this season, I think. I love the girl. One of the girls keeps speaking French, and it's like that's French, not Italian. That's why I think that's why I put French into my introduction today. It's like au revoir. So, um. You have Kristen then. Okay, I will admit, I groaned out loud when I saw Kristen going on the doppelganger site again. Because I was like, oh, not again. Enough. I'm tired of the doppelganger thing. It was mercifully short, and at least it was there for a reason because it's what ends up inspiring her to change her mind by, you know, checking out the Google Translate or whatever it is on her computer
Right.
to find out what the Dutch girl is saying, and you know, basically like, oh, you know, it's kind of like, I don't remember the exact words, but it's kind of like, you know, you only get one life, you might as well live it, you know, whatever the heck it was. That isn't what it says, but same basic idea, whatever. So I was like, all right, fine. There was a reason to do the doppelganger thing again, whatever, fine, it's over. And I guess it's around that time that Leland's about to show up. Now, I'm trying to. They did something which had a little bit of little kind of a kind of a haunted house kind of feel to it, kind of, you know, almost Evil Deadish, whatever. You know, we kind of close in on a close up of one doorknob, shake a shake
Yeah.
a shake hand. Then that's the front door, then the back door, and we cut to that pretty quickly. And then the next thing you know, the bricks are being pushed out of the wall downstairs, and all I kept thinking, and I remember this is going on while there's a countdown clock happening, which we're aware of because the girls have put on the glasses because they want to see what's going to happen when the
Right.
24 hours elapses. And I kept thinking, how fast is Leland moving around right now? Because he's running from one side of the house to the other side of the house. Then he has to get then he has to get in next door to go downstairs to get into where the tunnel is to go over here and somehow push those bricks out like, you know, like they were butter or something, you know.
Yeah,
But,
we never get to see these things, but I fully buy into the idea that Leland has some powers.
I don't know.
I
I don't
just
know.
don't. I mean, we
They've
don't
never.
see him, but
It would be weird to have had 4 seasons where we don't. I mean, we know he has abilities like David with the remote viewing and being able to control
hmm
things. I don't know if he has super speed, or I don't know if he can apparate it. Oh, if he could apparate, he'd just apparate the hell right inside the house. I don't know. Doesn't matter. It's more about he breaks through the wall, and of course he puts on his AirPods because even though, even though, even though there's no logic to putting, I mean, I get if you're like they did in that Hitman movie. No, what was that movie that wasn't all that great? The David Fincher movie that recently that was on Netflix with Fassbender, and he was a hitman, and whenever he's, you know, he's lining up a shot and whatever, I think he's listening to music. I think he's always listening to not The Cure, but someone like that. Can't remember who the artist was throughout the entire movie, whatever. But if you're about to sneak around the house to get to to murder, in fact, murder multiple people, characters, I don't know if you want to then take away take away your hearing, because you kind of want to make sure you can hear everything you can. That you're not tricked. That you know. It's an odd choice, but it's like, okay, Leland's kind of bonkers, and he just needs to have his
Yep.
Roger Miller playing. You know,
Yes.
oh dang me, they ought to take a rope and hang me. High from the highest tree, well, won't you wait for me? I love that they found yet another Roger Miller song to incorporate, because he's all about that
It's like
apparently.
it's his comfort, right? Because when he has to, we've seen it what 2 or 3 times now where he's got that playing. He's got
Not
the
that's
artist playing.
that. Oh,
Not the
it's
same song,
no.
but
I mean, they've used at least 3 or 4 Roger Miller songs throughout this show. I mean,
yeah, it's
recently
sort
and
of
before this as well.
it's weird because it's like, okay, is this like a comfort thing for you, or is this like, an egotistical theme song? What, why? What's the deal with it? Like you said, he had it playing when he walked into his apartment in the last episode, and now he's putting his AirPods in. Were you gonna, like you're sneaking, you got to be stealthy. You got to know how much sound you're making.
Right. Yet, even though he has them on, he does seem to have enough sensory perception to quickly stop that can from rolling when he comes through the door. The little booze can that Kristen
The
was
mini
talking about
margarita can.
getting them all into early on. Um, it's weird. I'm going to relate it to me again. I'm one of the few people. I play in a dart league on Monday and Tuesday evenings, and I'm one of the few people who chooses to wear AirPods when I play, because in this league you're allowed to do that. In certain kinds of tournaments you're allowed to. The bigger deal tournaments you're not allowed to wear them, whatever. But it's okay to wear. And I have like a playlist of I don't remember how many it is now. It's somewhere between 16 and 20 songs. I can't remember how many it is. And they play in a loop. And I keep it on when I'm playing. I usually take them off if I'm not, in between turns, whatever. Sometimes I might just forget and leave them on because I don't want, that's my way of not being able to having to talk to people, whatever. But it almost sets kind of like a calming baseline for me.
Oh yeah,
And
I
it gives me tunnel vision. I can funnel everything out and just focus. And the only way I was, in my mind, the way I was explaining what he was doing, like, this is his way of maintaining his focus when he's going through the house, whatever. Now, why he plays Roger Moore stuff all the time? It's everything you said. It's a comfort to him. He practically fetishizes.
Okay, but you know what? Something's coming together here for me. The last time we saw this and we questioned why it was playing when he walked into his apartment. But in this episode, we do find out that he wanted us there. He wanted us, tagging his phone.
Right.
So now, okay, there we go. That's why it was playing, because he was on a mission.
Right.
He was working.
Right. Yes. So he creeps up the stairs wielding that big ass knife again, and gets into the bedroom. He thinks she might be in the bathroom, because I think even with the AirPods on, maybe he thinks he hears a shower running, perhaps. Not realizing that, yeah, we know you're coming. And of course, right when the lyrics are hitting the aspect, they ought to take a rope and hang me, is when Kristen approaches him with the rope from probably one of Andy's failed climbs, I'm guessing, and starts to choke him from behind they fall back onto the floor, Leland on top of her. This entire murder sequence, or attempted murder sequence, or killing sequence, which there's an aspect of it which actually reminded me a little bit of a Hitchcock scene or two. There's a movie called Frenzy, which involves people being strangled throughout that, and the strangling always takes far longer than you like it to show how it's not that easy. There's also another Hitchcock movie, which is not one of the better Hitchcock. Frenzy's not a great movie. It's okay. I think it's It's one of the T movies. I forget if it's Topaz or Torn Curtain. I'm going to say it's Torn Curtain. It'll probably be Topaz. I think it's the one with Paul Newman. Paul Newman's actually in a Hitchcock movie. And there's this whole scene where you see how complicated and how difficult it is to actually kill somebody and, and the struggling through it. And that's what's happening here at the same time. But while that's happening, it's also oddly sexualized.
Mm-hmm.
The entire murder, the attempt here, and her reacting, obviously the body positioning, the way her legs kind of wrap around him. And when we talk about how Leland has had this obvious lustful kind of highly charged sexual kind of thing for Kristen the whole time. I mean, he only told her a few episodes ago how he's getting hard for her right then and there, right? To have this happening in this way, and of course he's facing the wrong direction, But I'll tell you, until we see David's hand, I was like, oh, I guess I'm wrong about the David Leland because I think she's actually going to kill him here. Holy crap! Until she doesn't.
Now, to go on about that with the idea that, because I mean, it was a very, intentional thing where we were getting the idea that it was almost seduction.
Mm-hmm. It was from seduction right up to orgasmic.
Right.
It looked like that's how she was. It looked like she was almost finishing there.
But what I loved about all of this is first of all, when I first saw David's hand, I wasn't sure he was really there. For a split second, I didn't really think he was really there.
Right.
But then this fact that David steps in along with Ben and saves her from being fully seduced.
Right.
It's like it wasn't about saving Leland, because what did she say? He'll just come back to life. Like he'll just reappear. This is evil, but they saved her from completely giving in. And I thought there was something so, with all the talk and everything, about friendship and caring about each other and the good and the evil, I really just, that right there was the most love I think that David has ever actually shown her.
Yeah, I kind of viewed it as, despite what she did in an earlier season, which really can't get away from that, but maybe she can justify what she did because
Right.
She was, at the end of the day, she was doing it to protect herself and protect her family. But here, where there would be another alternative, which is what they end up doing, he's saving her soul.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what he's supposed to be doing in the first place. If top of the list when you're a priest, saving souls.
Saving souls. Yep.
And top of the list of what Leland's doing is like, they're essentially, if you're in league with the devil, essentially, and that's what they're supposed to be, well, they take souls. They buy souls. And that's what we were talking about, the thing with, that's why I think there's, what it comes down to here, why it's David versus Leland, and what's in the balance is Kristen's soul.
Yep.
And that's, and even though it would appear that she's about to, extinguish Leland here, but in doing so, she would lose her soul at the same time.
Yep.
And so that's what makes that kind of work really nicely.
And on her own, she would have. But it's that, yeah, okay, it's a trope a little bit, but it's that idea of love, being the thing that saved it.
Right. So, and while this is happening, kids are up in their bunks.
Yeah, why not?
The countdown is ending, and it turns out just to be this elaborate ad for this, ridiculous thing.
Perfect.
And what I liked about this with the kids, and the thing I want to point out, in case I can't remember if we've pointed it on, or if I've been blunt about it on the podcast or not. Probably not. Okay, we even in this very episode, we may have made our comments about, Not she might not be the greatest mother at times, whatever. Blah, blah, blah. Although I could come up with a list of about 20 much worse mothers I've seen on TV shows over the
Sure.
years. Has anyone
Her
watched?
own mother being one of them.
Has anyone watched The Wire? Um, but here I was like going, oh my god, these kids. You know what they are? They're bad kids.
They're
Bad kids.
shitheads.
It's not just one. It's not just the one. They're bad kids. After all this, right after they say this ridiculous, I was like, oh man. Then the very first thing is, hey, do you got mom's credit card? And then the one who volunteers the information is the one who wants to be a nun. She should be the most good one of them. And she's like, oh, 4712. It's like, oh my God. They're horrible, horrible kids. They're stealing mom's credit card information for this bullshit for bad kid. These if my cats were kids, these would be them. Anyway. Except they would also be destroying things in the house. So David is insisting on, let us take care of it, but our way, not his, because his would have been, death.
Yep.
And then we get another great callback. We'd already heard about it in a previous episode, and you'd referenced it earlier as well, that Sister Andrea is going to be sent off to the nunnery where they all have to be quiet. The S is for silence episode, which is one of the great episodes of the show. And we return there. They even went and got the actress who played the nun from that episode, even though she's only on screen for, I don't know, 15, 20 seconds or something. But I like that, she brought out.
Yes.
I hope she got paid a couple $2 for it. And we see them dragging the bag, and we can hear. Now, I'm going to assume Michael Emerson was not actually physically in the bag while they were doing this, although I like to imagine he wanted to do it. I doubt it, but we can hear his muffled, how pissed off he's like, "Hey, you can't do this to me." I'm like, I'm gonna, and he gets locked up in what I call like the magic cabinet. It's like something straight out of a Twilight Zone episode. But what I thought was so great about that is like, okay, so if the show ends now, as we all believe it has, then this is the fate that Leland has been resigned to. He's going to be trapped in this little mystical, magical cabinet where Sister Andrea happens to be. So she can be, even silently, she can be forever tormenting him in this little box from this point on. And if perchance, there should ever be a return to this series, be a season, be it a movie, whatever it is, hey, guess what? They didn't have to kill him. You can just, unlock that cabinet. There he is. We got Leland back. So I thought that was a satisfactory, ingenious way to take the Leland character off the board, but leave open the possibility in case the show should ever come back, much like what happens in the following scene, the final scene in Rome.
Yes. I like the idea of, like, my head imagines, Sister Andrea dusting that relic box and just smiling. Yes. Just a little smile, pat, pat, pat as she walks away.
Oh, what I wonder is, well, first of all, did they shove him in? They shoved him in the cabinet, but in the bag. So is he going to be stuck in the bag in the cabinet, or is he able to get the bag off him and just be in the? I'm curious. Do they feed him in the cabinet? Does he? No,
I think he's just going to die in there. Like, I think he's just going to slowly starve to death, and then his soul would be trapped in it.
I don't know if they would have him starve. I don't know. That seems. I'm not sure they would do that. That seems a bit off to me. I don't think because then essentially you're killing him. I mean, that's just a more torturous form of murder, and that would seem to go against what David wanted to do. So I think they would be feeding him. They may just be, passing food through through little holes in the cabinet or something like that. I like that I actually acted that out right now, forgetting that this is a audio podcast, not a video. I always do that on this damn thing.
Why not?
Also, while this is all happening, while we flip back and forth to Rome, and it's also a reminder of, some things got rushed. And by the way, we will talk a little bit about that shortly, I think. And one of the things we saw, which is a memory of, we never did get back to that. When we see Ben is rolling up that big visual tarp that he had been using as far as being able to try to determine, how the djinn was hiding on the periphery of his vision and so on and so forth. And I guess by just showing him rolling it up, he's like, nah, I'm okay with this already. Or I'm past this. I'm not wearing a tinfoil hat anymore. Whatever. Even though I feel that never got, if there was,
Yeah,
that never got satisfactorily resolved at
no,
all.
it's like we got a scientific reason as to why it could be happening, but no resolution on how one is to undo that.
Yeah. We last saw the Jinn grabbing his head.
Yes,
And
with
then we
him
never went,
screaming.
and then we never got back to that. So I understand. I mean, look, I don't blame the Kings. You only had a certain amount of time to do things, and some things, as we've said a few times on the podcast the last few weeks, some things were going to get shortchanged. But that one was a big one for me
Yep.
because I felt that there was never a true resolution to that. Again, I don't mind. I expect things to be left open. The show and the way the show ends is deliberately to leave things
Yes.
open just in case. Like, so if it ends here, it's okay. But we have enough to start a new season if that should happen too. And that's mainly the stuff we see with Kristen and her child Timothy there. But the Ben thing kind of just, even here it is. Even if they didn't resolve it, but having him rolling up and getting rid of the tarp implies it's not an issue anymore. And I didn't
Right.
feel
It's
anything
all gone.
I didn't feel anything had happened to give me that sense that he should be feeling that way.
Right.
That kind of bothered. I would have rather there be a hint that, hey, guess what? The Jinn is still a problem in his life, and we will ever get back to it or not. Not Jinn's not a problem. I don't know why it's not a problem. There's nothing that happened in this episode that really should have told us that.
I mean, like, even if it was something like, when he goes into that cubicle and he looks over and he sees a guy and nods, looks over at the guy and nods. What if he turned the other way and saw the Jinn sitting in the other chair and nods at him?
That would have been great.
Okay, there, we don't need a resolution.
Yeah, I kind of
We've just accepted this is a part of Ben now.
right, and exactly, I would have been fine with that because that's why I could be fine with with Kristen looking down at her child and finally seeing like his eyes kind of light up there, and then the fact that he's got the little pointy teeth.
His little twofers.
And I was like, maybe that baptism didn't take quite as well as we thought. And I love that she just pops the pacifier into his mother.
Well, it's so good because that is so, like, again, it's like this woman has learned nothing.
And she's like, no. She's like, no, nothing's wrong. Fine.
Totally fine.
Because, I'm just, after I have my little moment with Ben on the phone and, he gets to see my cool sunglasses and I'm going to walk away and I'm going to look the best I've ever looked from behind in a dress ever on the show. And
Right?
I went, whoa,
It's so true.
Whoa, David, are you sure you want to still be a priest?
He looked good in Italy.
I like they're both cool, wearing their sunglasses,
Yes.
and walking around, whatever. Yeah, and then you realize, oh my gosh, it's over. The show is over. The series is over. It's all
That's
over.
it.
And I was very upset.
And that was the end. Or was it? Probably.
So overall, look, this is a weird one. I vastly enjoyed the episode. There's so many things I liked about it. I wouldn't, and I don't want to knock the episode at all. I don't plan to, but maybe, and it's not their fault. It's the fault of the fact, okay, we gotta wrap everything up. And we had said, and other people I know who watch it probably said the same, I know for a fact said the same thing. Ooh, how are they going to wrap all this up with just one episode to go? And we had speculated about, maybe it'll be a longer episode, whatever. The episode ran a little bit longer, but then you got to take away the behind the scenes stuff. Cause I was like, then they're like, wait, the credits are coming up and there's still 7 minutes. They're not doing that Marvel Universe bullshit at the end of this, is there? Like, it's a behind the scenes thing, like it's an HBO show or something. Okay, fine.
Right.
Which is cool, except part of me was like, couldn't you give us like 7 more minutes of show and then just make that like a different thing you click on when it's over, like other things do, whatever. Because it did feel at times in this episode, considering you're trying to wrap up storylines that have been going on for 4 seasons now.
Right.
There was a bit of a rush to it.
There was a few spots where there was a jump.
Yeah. And which is, again, they did what they could do. So I admire that I admire the amount of what they were able to pull off.
I think that knowing that I mean, they had they got the 4 extra episodes, which is okay because I have read some articles in the last week leading up to the finale, but they did have the deal worked out where they could have the extra 4 episodes because those that were closest to the project that were above them
Mm.
really were fans of the show,
Right.
and thought it was valid that they should be able to tie up some of these loose ends. They had hoped, like we had discussed earlier, that they would get 1 or 2 more seasons. In fact, they had serious consideration of, you're gonna like, love and hate this part. They had serious consideration of the following season be much more involved with the court case,
Hmm.
and really play back on their other worlds from their other shows,
Interesting. Okay.
because they wanted to tie in the reality of how often evil wins.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right.
So that's kind of a place that they felt like they had to like cut really really short when they were going to take it in a much longer direction. Also, the doppelganger, underlying story with the doppelganger is another one that they were really interested in following through, and they didn't really have a way to follow through on it.
Right.
And so they just kind of have to, tuck it in somewhere, I guess. But I mean, I don't know about you, but I actually I do. Shut up. I do know about you. I feel like the doppelganger storyline that we didn't need to have.
Yeah. I didn't. There was nothing. Okay. We'll go Ben, David, Kristen. There was nothing inherently interesting about the doppelganger situation that Ben was viewing, other than the fact that Ben's own life, he has less than content and he's questioning so many things and his belief system and about being all about empiricism, uh, keeps taking a beating. And yet he persists and then he can see,
Right.
just a family man, but it's like,
Oh,
okay. That's,
an interesting note about that, though, that is Sif the actor, that is his actual
so,
real life wife and child.
oh, cool. I did not know that. I kind of wished I wish the person in the clip had actually been the actor himself, and that would have made it more interesting to me. Because like, oh my God, my doppelganger is Asif Funch. Oh yeah, I never did watch the Daily Show. I do look like that guy. That would have been great.
I
Uh,
don't, but I still don't see, I see it, and I don't even. Okay, so
but
okay, well we're watching it, and he sees his wife and his child, and it's like,
but
oh,
I got nothing out of it.
yeah,
It
this is the life that I should have had, or maybe that I want. So instead, you're going to go and take a $605,000 a year job where you live in a cubicle. There's no
yeah,
tie in here.
yeah, I didn't get it. I didn't find the David doppelganger thing about
No,
the fake angry boxer dude.
no,
And the whole hate that did nothing for me. I don't, I don't think it really did anything for David when he viewed it himself. I don't think it
no.
really did much. And other than, look, Kristen's going to fantasize about David regardless. Just the fact
Yep,
she got to fantasize with David with a little bit more hair on him didn't really
right.
make a difference to me. I will say, I don't care how much of a joke it sounds like. No, I'm saying this. I think it was a lost opportunity just since it didn't really factor into the story of the show at all. Then come on, guys. You only have a couple episodes to go. You
Yep.
could have made it the character that, um, that Mike Holter played on The Good Wife. You could have made him,
Yeah,
you could have made it Leland Bishop, who, well, it's the same actor. So obviously he's just as good looking, but he's a little cooler than David.
yeah,
And it still would have worked for Kristen's thing. And it was like, oh, it's part of the same universe. That would have been awesome. Come on.
yep.
It wouldn't have ruined anything by doing that. I don't see why. And you could have even had Leland Bishop working out at the gym and hitting something if you wanted to get there. It would have been fine because he, dude obviously works out. He's built like a thing, whatever.
Yeah, I think that would have been great.
And then, yeah.
I love that idea.
And then Kristen's doppelganger was like, yeah, whatever. Like,
Exactly. And that's the thing. And this show has so many things that were funny and endearing and creepy, and they would give you just enough where there'd be just enough to dig into, so it was like there was stuff under the surface, But this whole thing was, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
It,
It, it there were whatever little bits we got that pushed the story or pushed the characters forward. And there's a little bit here could have been done in another way to get them where like the fact that she watched the thing with her doppelganger and that's what ultimately inspires her to decide she will go to Rome. You could have come up with another way to do that.
yes.
I'm just whatever you could. I don't know. It could have been your kids who overheard the whole damn thing anyway, and your kids could have been the ones to convince you for in some way. That would have been fine. I mean,
Yes.
there's a million other ways to do it.
The time traveler storyline too,
Yeah,
that
I know.
seemed very pointless. I mean, considering what we got in the end.
I'm still kind of bothered by that because I still contend that she was, even though they seem to be, by never going back to it, they seem to be like, no, she wasn't. She's just a chick.
Right.
But then to have like even Andy just to disappear like that seemed kind of like, oh, okay, what? Wait, what? Oh, all right. I guess because we don't need that complication in it anymore. But
Right.
yeah, again, I think by not having another full season and trying to basically strip down and streamline for these final 4 episodes, which were very good episodes. So
Right.
I think we're overall being very positive about it, but we're just very cognizant of the things that we had to be cut down and that we lost that I think would have been explored more in one, if not 2 more seasons. Like we said, that episode with that great episode with the storm and the death of Cheryl and Andrea and the Gray Man and all that. That was
Right.
supposed to be the finale of the season. That was supposed to be the final episode, and then we'd pick up and when you see it, like, yeah, if you think about it, yeah, that's a fucking final episode of
It sure is.
season finale, and then we got 4 more, which were good and very good, in fact, at times, but again, it goes back to what I said at the beginning of the podcast, where it's hard not to be angry about the whole thing. I mean, I get it was, it was a decision that was made. It was especially because there was such a lag time with the writer's strike. And then with the decisions that Paramount Plus is making, where they're really kind of chopping down most,
Right.
if not all, their programming because, there may be another buyout happening with, another entity coming in, no pun intended, or whatever. So probably the only thing that might survive is maybe, I don't know, one Star Trek show and everything else.
Yeah.
Who the hell knows?
Yeah, realistically, because everything else that they have is even the stuff that like this that came from CBS,
Mm-hmm.
getting everything separated. They are very vocal about that they left some of this open in the hopes that just maybe,
Yeah.
you know.
And I wouldn't rule it out. Obviously, hey, we've seen shows come back, look how many decades and all of a sudden Twin Peaks came back. Anything is possible in this day and
Yeah.
age.
And there's even the possibilities where you've seen some shows that get cut early, and so instead of picking up new seasons, they make a movie to finalize the story more.
Like Serenity for Firefly or the Veronica Mars thing, even though that movie wasn't all that great. And then they came back and did do a real season, which was actually much better. Yeah. Oh, look. Obviously, we hope that they do somehow find a way to do more evil. Who doesn't want to do more evil? I know I do. Obviously, the most perfect situation would have been Netflix because they're already carrying the show, and it's actually
Right.
let's get a decent viewership there as well. And since Netflix seems to want to throw money at everything else, why not? I mean, if Netflix was willing to bring back Lucifer for multiple seasons, they can bring back Evil. Because I got news for you. I watched Lucifer, but Evil's like 1,000 times better than Lucifer. I'm sorry.
Agree.
But I'll say this: love the series. I thought, even though things got cut down and rushed and blah 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 blah, as we all know, overall it was still a mostly satisfying season. Outside of a few things we've already mentioned, whatever, and considering the constraints they were under, both time and everything else, I think they did a pretty darn good job with it. one or two things I wish had been done a little bit better. But hey, I mean, it's not an A plus, but it might be an A minus, might be a B plus somewhere in that area. If we were grading things, which we don't really do here, but I always do it anyway. But yeah. I mean, I don't want to get into like I don't know what my favorite season of the show might be because I haven't watched them all in a while, so they kind of all bleed together. I can only remember distinguishing the first season from the next two that followed. But I think I get confused what was in the second season and what was in the third season sometimes.
The second season was, well, and the second season is a little bit weird too, because it's like they were freshly, like on their own, like trying to let go of the CBS regulation,
Right.
and find their footing.
Isn't it the second season where she starts getting really kind of going out at night and being really bonkers?
Getting real loosey-goosey,
Yeah, that's the second season, right?
Yeah, and then we have our angels and demons storylines, which is always was really great. But I really feel for myself that the fourth season, short of one episode, has been my favorite season.
Oh yeah, that one episode. I don't know. Maybe I do love a lot about the third season. They're all good. I'm not picking one over the other. I don't want to, and I'm not going to because I don't have to, and no one really wants me to because we've been talking.
There are no rules.
Plus, we've been talking for long enough. So, looked at the time like.
There's always that.
Okay.
There's always. There's always the bell.
Yeah, we need to wrap this fucker up because I got stuff to do, man. All right. So, final verdict. Good series finale. We hope it's in air quotes, and we do return to this world of evil at some point in the future on some streaming service, be it Netflix or anywhere else, whether it be for a season or even just an additional movie. I would hope it's a season. I find when something comes back, but it's just like it's like when Deadwood came back, but they only did like just a little Deadwood movie. It's not that it was bad, but it kept making me think, yeah, but the design of this show is designed as a series and to really kind of richly build upon storylines and characters, and pushing it all into like an hour and a half or hour and 45 minutes for everything kind of leaves me a little, at least when they did the Twin Peaks thing, they gave it an entire season. It was out there weird and bonkers more so than the show had ever been before, but at least it was something. But yeah, I'm glad that my friends got me to watch this show, and it was as odd and strange and fun a little thing as I've watched over the last few years. And I'm glad that I know a number of people that I've also convinced to check it out. Problem is, you got to find people who actually have Paramount Plus. But then then I realized, it's actually got a couple seasons on Netflix. Watch it on Netflix, and they'll eventually catch up with it. They catch up
get over there and watch it. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I love the concepts. I love that it was always just the right amount of creepy for television. Characters were wonderful. I'm gonna miss it. It was something I look forward to every week, but I'm fairly satisfied with the ending. I don't have a whole lot of negativity about it. Overall, I feel good about it.
Like I said, in case I kind of overshadowed it by complaining about a couple things, I didn't mean to come off that way. I did I thought this was a fine finale in many ways. And again, the thing we've mentioned about like specifically the Ben stuff more than anything else, but then a few other things. That was a consequence of them having to end everything within 4 episodes as opposed to having an entire full season. And that was just one of the unfortunate bits of collateral damage. But otherwise, it's as solid a series finale as I've seen. I'm not placing it in the upper tier pantheon of series finales. And a lot of that is because I'm still not 100% positive it will be the series finale. I mean, like when Breaking Bad or Mad Men ended, you knew that was it.
Ended.
It was it.
Yes.
I mean, although one was like, but Breaking Bad had, I know, don't, but well, come in, but Better Call, quiet. It was the final episode. Don't ruin it. Don't ruin my point, man. Don't ruin my, can't all be 6 feet under. Look, they're all dead, just like in Lost. Anyway, and on that bizarre note, I got to wrap this up. Hey, if you enjoyed this podcast, you know what? You'll enjoy hanging out on our podcast page I mean, our Facebook page. You know what? You can hang out on our podcast page too if you want. I don't know what you'll be doing there. No one has ever, I don't think the last time someone commented on our podcast page was like maybe 6 or 7 years ago, maybe 5 years ago.
I don't even know if that's a thing anymore. Is that a thing anymore?
You can. When
Do people do it?
No, again, no one's done it in like 5 or 6 years. And whenever I go to upload one, the last 2 comments are on the side where I always see them. I was going, oh, this is like some friend of Brian's or something who's like, oh, Brian, really good. Or then the other one, I don't even know. And they're people, I don't know who they are. So it's not like,
complete strangers.
Complete strangers, real people. Or maybe they're not. Maybe they're bots. Anyway, why did I bring that up? Oh, yeah. Yeah. Hey, I've never mentioned that. So if you ever, our podcast page is stvdpodcast.podbean.com. It's where you can archive an entire archive of podcasts are there, all 416 of them. I think the number we're at now, which means I think that's the one place you can go where everything is there. I don't think you can find everything anywhere else, including either be Spotify or Apple Podcasts, whatever. I think they only will hold a certain number if I'm not mistaken. Although if you do happen to go on Apple and you want to give us a good review there, go ahead. And if you don't want to give us a good review there, then don't. You can follow us on our Facebook page. That's what I meant to say. The Serious TV Drama Podcast page. Like the page and join the conversation about shows like Evil, like so many others. You can follow us on Twitter at STVD Podcast. You can follow us on Instagram, Serious TV Drama as one word. I've amassed about 20 something images. I still have to get around to uploading there. Maybe next weekend. I don't know. And that's pretty much all I can think of right now. I'm kind of, this is earlier than we tend to ever do a podcast, but I seem more tired than I normally am. So
this is because this is the nap pre the baseball game.
This is when I'm normally nap. Although the cats were going bonkers just before we started the podcast, which brought Jamie great joy and me less. And I was like, you know what? You see, it doesn't matter what time we start. We start at 11 o'clock at night. They're going bonkers. We're starting like at 5 or 5:30. They're going bonkers. So I decided, well, you know what? It's kind of close to time to feed them. And I said, let me feed them something that has turkey in it. And maybe they'll have like the Thanksgiving effect and they'll get all sleepy.
Little tryptophan.
And you know what? They haven't been fucking around this entire podcast. So it worked.
And it worked.
It worked. So Jamie, thank you so much for joining me, doing these evil podcasts. I should mention that at the very least, we are going to be getting together for one more podcast within the next weekish or so. We said we'd do a podcast on the 4th season of The Umbrella Academy.
We did.
I did say that before I'd watched the 4th season of The Umbrella Academy. We are still going to do a podcast on the 4th season of Umbrella Academy. I will say it will probably be somewhat different than my previous podcast about the Umbrella Academy. So that'll be something to look forward to. Some of you might look forward to it more than others. We'll see. A few people have actually texted me. My friend who listens to the podcast, I think a couple of other people who don't because they don't watch Evil. I love that within the same 2 weeks, I got very similar texts from people about having just watched the finale of that show. And let's just say the word meh was used a lot. In one case, I actually did a screenshot of one page and sent it to the other one. It's like, this is so weird. Everyone, whether it be me or someone else, everyone just keeps saying meh, meh, meh. That podcast might just be titled meh.
Meh. Yeah.
And our friend David God, I think it's about him. Yeah. So we'll do that. Beyond that, I'm not sure. I do realize The Penguin is coming to HBO Max or HBO, whatever the hell we call it, in about a month's time. Other things that are popping up on the TV horizon, we don't really podcast about Only Murders in the Building, so I wouldn't expect to do that.
Yeah, they're getting their final season. We got the Rings of Power about to drop their
never seen it.
2.
Never seen it.
And I do believe that I don't have an exact date, but Handmaid's Tale is back up and running like within the month, I think.
God, it's still on. Why? my God. I'm sorry. I've been
Well,
watching that.
there's clearly not enough, eye lock stares into the camera that we got to get some more.
Yeah,
We gotta have some more.
I need more Elizabeth Moss staring at me creepily through the camera for
I know how
10
much
more
you love
episodes.
it.
Oh my God. It's like, I used to love Peggy. I don't like you. Oh God, that's coming. I can't believe it's not over already. Doesn't that show feel like it should have been over like 3 seasons ago? I mean, I'm not saying it's bad. It just feels, enough
I
already.
think it's gonna be a few more seasons before it disappears.
Oh my God. I'm glad because it's such a happy show.
Yeah, it's
It,
really uplifting, isn't it?
It's like the pushing daisies of the 21st of the later 21st century now. Anyway, yeah, and I know, I think What We Do in the Shadows doesn't come back till October, if I'm not mistaken, like October,
Yes.
like October 21st. I don't know why they did just say, let's just bring it back on Halloween, but whatever. There's
Yeah.
probably a show or two we're forgetting. There are things that are coming that might be, I don't know if they're coming later this year or maybe early next year. Honestly, I don't know what else we're going to podcast about. It's hard enough finding time to do the podcast right now as is. And I'm about to be charged another hosting fee for the Scott Forgot one, which I haven't even touched since April. So I got to think long and hard if I'm going to continue that podcast or end it or not, because I don't know if I can afford to keep it going, especially if I'm not recording it. So
It's financial obligations.
got
Adulting is a blast.
Yeah, I mean it's not a lot. It's like $100-something, but still, it's $100-something. I would rather not have to spend. Anyway, again, Jamie, thank you so much for joining me. I look forward to discussing the fun and frivolity of the Umbrella Academy with you in the next week or so.
Boy, howdy.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be great. Oh, and you'll still probably be nicer about it than I will be, but because I plan.
Well, that's just us in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's pretty. You're the sweet to my sour, the delightful to my dour.
I'm gonna be writing this down. It'll be our next intro.
The kryptonite to my power. Anyway, all right, Jamie, thank you so much for being here.
Trifecta.
There you go. And thank you all for listening. I'll just say goodnight now and let Jamie end the damn thing.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.